Hey team, in this video we're going to look at the Cronos quickstart project under the Cosmos section here, where we'll look at indexing all transfers of Cro Crow tokens. What are Crow tokens, you might ask? Well, at crocrow.com, scrolling down, you can see here that this is the main NFT of the Cro Crow ecosystem, where holders passively earn a share of the project profits via airdrops or royalty distribution. The first step when creating a project is to check that we have the required prerequisites. Navigating to Quickstart in the documentation site here, and then going to step 1, create a new project. You can see that we need Node, Docker, and the SubQuery CLI. Now let's do a quick system check in VS Code, where I can run node-v, and if I've got Node installed, it will return a version, which here you can see is 20.3.1. If you don't see a version, it means you don't have Node installed, so do a quick Google search for Node and you can install it. Or if you're using brew on a Mac, you can run the command brew install node as well. After this, you'll need to install Docker, which you can again run via a Google search. And then the last step is to download the SubQuery command line. And you can do this by running npm or node package manager install -g for global subql CLI. Now, just a note that you need to have Node installed first before running npm, because when you install Node, the Node package manager gets installed along with it. Once this is installed, jump into VS Code and run subql-v to get the version. And you can see here I'm running version 3.5.1. Once you have all of these installed, you're now ready to start creating your first project. To create a project, we first want to run the Subql init command. We can then provide a name for the project, such as Crow Token example here. And then if I hit enter, you'll see that I'll be presented with a list of network families that I can choose. There's quite a few here, but let's just mouse down and select Cosmos. And then even within the Cosmos ecosystem, you can see all these zones. And then I'll select Cronos. And then we have two options. We can then choose either the EVM starter project via RPC or the one via ETH. Now, RPC is the standard Cosmos interface, and ETH is the Ethermint interface that uses the Ethereum API and the standard ABI file. For this project, we're going to use ETH, so let's hit enter. And then all of a sudden, you can see on the left-hand side here, we've got all these files and folders that are auto-created for us, generating this scaffold or framework to build our project. Next up, I can specify my own RPC endpoint, or I can just hit enter and accept the default in yellow here, which I'll do that. And I'll do the same for the following parameters. And there we have it. My project is now ready to go. After we have initialized our project, we want to download all the project dependencies. So to do this, let's cd into our project directory here. And then I'm going to run the basic command of yarn install. And this will take about 30 seconds, depending on your internet speed. So I'll catch you after this has finished. After installing our dependencies, the first file that we're interested in is the project.yaml file, also known as the manifest file. Let me open this up and I'll increase the screen real estate here. And this file can be viewed as the entry point to your project, defining most of the details on how SubQuery will index and transform the chain data. It also indicates where we're indexing data from and to what on-chain events we're subscribing to. At the top here, you can see we've got the spec version. We've also got the name of our project that we specified earlier. and then also the description here as well. We've also got a number of other fields which are defined in our documentation, which I'll show you shortly. Down here, the schema file, this points to the location of where our file exists, which you can see here on the left-hand side, and I'll talk more about this very shortly. And then below this, we've got a network section where we've defined the chain ID of Cronos, and then also the endpoint of where we're getting the data from. Now, all of these fields do not have to be changed. It's the data sources section that we want to update and make it specific to our particular project. So let me go ahead and jump back into the Cronos Quick Start, and then scrolling down, I'm first going to update the manifest file. Let's copy the data sources section, and then I'm going to replace it here like so and save it. And what you can see is we're using the Ethereum runtime, and we're starting to index from block 5.1 million. Note that you could start from block 946 because that is when the smart contract was deployed and the first block was minted. However, there's more interesting information at this block height here. So we'll use that. And then down below, we've got the actual address, the smart contract address of the Cro Crow Token. We're also pointing to an API file, and we'll have to get that shortly as well. And then down here we have our handlers, and these are effectively functions that get triggered when the project encounters a match on our filter. So the code here indicates that we'll be running a handle transfer mapping function whenever a transfer topic filter is encountered, all on the Ethereum blockchain. And to get more information about this, let's check out the documentation here. If I scroll down, you'll see we've got a link to the manifest section here. Click on this, and you can see there's a definition of the various top-level specs, the schema, network, runner. And then scrolling down further, we've got the data sources section. And you can see within Cosmos, we've got 4 different types of handlers that you can use: the block, transaction, message, and the event. The second file of interest out of the 3 that we need to change is the schema file. The schema.graphql file here essentially determines the shape of the data that we want to extract from the blockchain. So what we can do is jump back to the quick start guide here, and I'll scroll up, and I'm going to copy the example schema here. It's just one object called transfer. So if I go back here and let's paste it in, delete this, hit paste and save. You can see we've got one particular entity, which is effectively a database table containing 4 fields. We've got ID, from to, and token ID as well. Now, if I go into the documentation, let's go and check out the GraphQL schema section. Here you can see that for each entity, we need to define an ID field here with an exclamation mark, because this serves as a unique primary key. We've also got the following supported scalar types that you can see: int, string, big integer, float, etc. And if you want to get fancy, the entities can be related to each other as well. The relationships you can see on the right hand side, we can have one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, and also a reverse lookup if required. So if you want some more information on this, feel free to jump into the documentation here. Otherwise, in this particular example, you'll see that the entity is fairly straightforward, comprising of these fields as mentioned. The last file that we want to modify is called the mappings file, and you can find it in the source mappings folder. It's called the mapping handlers.ts. So let's go ahead and copy the example file first from our quick start guide, and then I'll explain how it works. So here's the sample one. Let me copy this. I'll go and select all. Let's delete it, paste it in and save it. And what you can see here is that we first import some classes and types, and then down below we are defining a function called handle transfer. This function receives an argument called log of type Ethereum log, and then it goes ahead and it creates a new object here, extracting the various blockchain data out and storing it in the respective variables, and then finally calling save on our transfer object. To build our project, we first want to run a command called yarn code gen. What this does is it uses the GraphQL schema file and generates the associated TypeScripts. And you can see a new folder has appeared called types. And then here, this file is auto-generated like so. And it's got a .ts extension as well. Now, you'll see that we've got an error saying that the Cro Crow.abi JSON does not exist. And I did mention this earlier. And let's go ahead and see how we can get this file. I'll jump into the manifest file. I'll copy out the smart contract address. And then I'm going to jump in to the Cronos Blockchain Explorer. This is at chronoscan.com. Let me paste in the contract address here. And then you can see I've got a contracts tab, which I can click on. Scrolling down, I'm looking for an ABI file. Here it is here, the contract ABI. Let me copy this. And then I will go ahead back into the code. And we've got this file here called erc20.abi.json. Now, this is the file that I want to replace. So let me select all, delete the contents, paste in the ABI file that I just copied over. Let me format the document, save it. And of course, I need to change the name because it's looking for this particular name. So let's go and rename the file. Hit enter. And now let me run yarn code gen again. And it's ran successfully. Next up, we want to build the project. So I can run yarn build. And what this does is it creates a distribution folder performing things such as code optimization, preparing for a deployment. And you would have seen this new folder here called dis appear as well. Now, finally, to start the project, we want to run yarn start docker. And remember to have docker open in the background because when I hit enter, you can see here the images will be downloaded and the various nodes started as well. So with this running in the background, what I'll do is let's jump into the GraphQL playground at localhost 3000. And what I'll do is also copy out the example GraphQL query. Here, copy this out. Refresh the playground here. Let me paste this and hit enter. And I don't have any data at the moment. And there you have it. You can see we've got some data coming back here and we can do a quick cross check. Let me just stop the node in the background here because it is a public endpoint and I don't want to hit the API limit. I'm going to copy this particular ID, go to the Chronoscan webpage. Let's do a search for this particular transaction here. And what you should be able to see is that we have gone ahead and indexed the token ID of 6797. This one here. And we've got 6797 over here as well. And if I double check the to and from, you see it's all sevens. So all sevens here and 6BCBB. And in fact, you'll find that the from address is all from the same owner anyway. So what we've got is it's extracted the very first transaction here. I could go ahead and modify this to extract the other ones as well if I wanted to. So there you go. a very quick project indexing all the transfers of Cro Crow tokens.